This is intentional chaos. You know, I had talked to representatives of the Trump administration earlier on to tell them that the Los Angeles Police Department could control things that were happening here and that there was no need to federalize troops. And so to have this here is really just a provocation and something that was not needed in our city.
So that was the mayor of my city, again, repeating her line that the National Guard was an unnecessary escalation and that LAPD had it under control. Well, a few things on this. First of all, it makes no sense whatsoever to claim that any violence that we saw on January 6th was solely the fault of the offenders, which I would agree with, and to blame the administration for not having the National Guard there. But then to sit here and say that the violence that we see in Los Angeles isn't the fault of the offenders, but is rather the fault of the National Guard, which is exactly what the mayor said in a press conference yesterday, that it was the fault of Donald Trump for federalizing the National Guard. That makes no sense whatsoever. You need to apply the same standard of logic to every situation if you're going to be an honest person. And anytime there's violence, anytime there's riots, that is the fault of the offender. That is the fault of the violent party or individual who decided to engage in violence, which is not covered by the First Amendment, okay? That is the fault of the person. And also, another thing that the police chief said last night in a press conference is that it's been violent since Friday. He confirmed that.
This violence that I've seen is disgusting. It's escalated now since the beginning of this incident. What we saw the first night was bad. What we've seen subsequent to that is getting increasingly worse and more violent. Tonight we had individuals out there shooting commercial-grade fireworks at our officers.
It's been violent since Friday. National Guard didn't arrive until Sunday morning around 4 a.m. So again, doesn't really compute here. The math isn't mathing. If you're telling me that the violence was started, the violence happened because it was a response to the National Guard coming in, and yet it's been violent since Friday, since well before the National Guard came in. Another thing the police chief said in a press conference last night is that LAPD is overwhelmed.
We are overwhelmed as far as the number of people out there engaged in this type of activity and the type of things that they're doing. They'll take backpacks, and the backpack will have a cinder block in it. They have a hammer, and they'll break up the cinder block and use that, pass it around to throw at officers, to throw at cars, and throw at other people. We've seen people with hammers, and you've broadcasted, breaking the bollards behind the federal building and taking the rocks, if you will, or pieces of concrete, and throwing them at officers. We've had liquid of who knows what description thrown at officers. There's no limit to what they're doing to our officers.
They're overwhelmed. It was also reported yesterday in the news that LAPD was stretched too thin in terms of resources.
A lot of calls for help being made initially by LAPD. LAPD was initially requested to help with the freeway situation here as they saw the crowd move towards the freeway, and LAPD noted that they don't have anybody to spare. They've already asked all additional resources to report to the scene in front of the federal building.
They needed LAPD to come out on the freeway when it was blocked and taken over by rioters, but LAPD couldn't do that because they were responding to another incident where two motorcyclists ran into a line of LAPD officers, injuring a couple of them, intentionally ran into that line of officers. So LAPD is not able to respond to all of this and also serve the community of Angelenos who need the police sometimes and need to call the police and need to be able to have them respond in a timely manner. So we're hearing people talking out of both sides of their mouths when it comes to state and local officials and law enforcement here. They're saying, we didn't need the National Guard, we don't need the National Guard, but then they're also saying we were and we still are overwhelmed. They were overwhelmed yesterday when the National Guard was here, and that's another thing. The National Guard has not been federalized and has come in and now acting like it's martial law or something. Currently, there are about 300 National Guard troops in Los Angeles. And right now, because the president has not invoked the Insurrection Act, they are limited solely to protecting federal agents and federal property. That's it. They're not engaging with the community in any meaningful way. They're surrounding the federal detention center in Los Angeles. They're not doing arrests. They're not out on the freeway arresting people who are blocking it. They're not doing any of that, okay? okay? They're here to support the ICE agents. Because why? Because ICE agents don't have the support of state and local officials in Los Angeles. So National Guard has been deployed to be that support. And thank God they have, because when you hear the police chief tell it, they're overwhelmed and this situation is not under control. And again, the timeline doesn't work out if you're saying that the violence happened as a response to the National Guard being deployed. It simply doesn't work out. And you know what, the National Guard, 300 National Guard troops being deployed to defend a federal building and federal agents is not a reason for you to get all violent and start breaking the law and endangering law-abiding Angelenos. That's not a good excuse, okay? It's not a very good reason, okay? Again, National Guard isn't out on our streets stomping around arresting people. They're surrounding a federal building in Los Angeles defending federal agents. That's it, and it's not a good excuse for you to get violent. So the situation was not under control. We absolutely needed the National Guard, and this entire situation has happened because places like Los Angeles, states like California, deem themselves sanctuary cities and states and refuse to cooperate with the federal government, even though constitutionally the federal government has the power over immigration. Constitutionally, the federal government has the power over immigration, and it is wrong, it is unconstitutional for states and cities to say that we are not going to abide by that. We have long-standing immigration laws passed by Congress, national immigration laws, and the USA has a right and a duty to enforce those. There's nothing fascist about it. There's nothing authoritarian about it. And I'll repeat what I said yesterday, which is, again, sanctuary cities, sanctuary states endanger illegals. They endanger the very people that they claim they want to protect because they welcome all these illegals here. They invite them. They say, we're friendly to you. And in many ways they are. In California, we'll even give you free healthcare as an illegal. And yet these cities cannot do anything to defend these illegals from ICE. They can't stop ICE from coming in. They can't push back against ICE. All they can do is say, we're not going to cooperate with ICE. So what ends up happening? They've gathered all these illegals here, and now they can't really do anything to stop them from being deported. All they can do is not cooperate. And it's chaos when you have state, city, local officials who refuse to cooperate with federal authorities just doing their job when it comes to immigration. That's chaos. And that's what we have right now. And people keep saying, oh, he said he was going to go after the worst of the worst. Why are other people being arrested? They are still going after the worst of the worst. They are targeting public safety threats who are illegal. However, in these targeted operations, in these targeted investigations, if they come across you and you're also here illegally, even though you don't have a criminal record, they're going to do their job. It is their job, and they are going to arrest you. They are going to deport you. They're not just going to come in contact with an illegal, even someone who doesn't have a criminal record, and say, hey, you're good. No, you're not good. You've broken our law. You're not immune to our law just because you allegedly haven't committed any other crimes while here. So if you're upset by the number of collateral arrests, the number of people who have no other criminal record, but they are here illegally, who are being arrested, if you're upset by that, you have sanctuary cities to blame. Because if sanctuary cities would cooperate with federal agents when it comes to immigration, there would be far fewer ICE agents in our cities. But because state and local officials refuse to cooperate, now ICE has to send in multiple agents to find the criminals they're looking for, to find the bad guy or bad guys. They're sending in multiple agents because state and local officials didn't cooperate, even though they could have, even though they should have. So if you're upset by people being arrested, be upset with Democrats, be upset with sanctuary cities. We absolutely needed the National Guard here. I'm ready for the Marines to come in, okay? Because this situation was not under control. It is not under control. It has not been under control since it started on Friday.